continue our discussion on sheet functions with lesson 12, lookup and reference functions. VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup. This function searches through a table vertically and returns the value of a cell in a row. VLOOKUP supports exact and approximate matching as well as partial matching using wildcards. The syntax is as shown. There are 4 arguments to be supplied. The first argument, search key, is the value to search the table for. Next is range, which is the table to search. Always ensure your search key is the first column of the range. The next argument, index, is the column index of the value to return. And the last argument is sorted, indicates whether the column to be searched is sorted, in which case the closest match for search key will be returned. Is sorted is optional and is set to false by default. In our example, we have a list of items with their current prices. We want to quickly find the prices of items using their codes in this table. We use VLOOKUP to implement this. Here, we only have a small list of items. But imagine you have a large set with hundreds or even thousands of records, and you want to return a value elsewhere in your spreadsheet. Using VLOOKUP, you can do this by supplying the record's ID as the search key. But what if you are not certain about the search key? This is where approximate and partial matching comes in handy. Approximate matching is achieved by setting is sorted to false, and partial matching by using wildcard characters. The HLOOKUP, which stands for horizontal lookup, is similar to VLOOKUP, except the lookup value is searched for horizontally rather than vertically. You can think of it as a transposed VLOOKUP. The syntax is even the same as for VLOOKUP. The only difference is that the index here will be the row index, and the search key must be in the first row of the range. The index function returns the value of a given cell within a range specified by some row and column offset. It is often used with the match function. You can think of it as an alternate way to do a VLOOKUP. The syntax is as seen here. The function has 3 arguments. Reference is the range under consideration. Row and column are the row and column offsets respectively. The 2 are optional though, and if not supplied, the function will return reference, that is, the entire range. The match function looks for a certain value in a specific cell range and returns the relative position of that value within this range. Match supports approximate and exact matching as well as wildcards or partial matches. The match function takes 3 arguments. Search key is the value to look for. Range is the one-dimensional array to carry out the search on. And search type is the search method to use. For search type, there are 3 possible options to choose from: 0, 1, or -1. 0 is the default search method and most frequently used. It looks for the exact value when range is unsorted. 1 causes match to assume that the range is sorted in ascending order and return the largest value less than or equal to search key. -1 finds the smallest value greater than or equal to search key when range is sorted in descending order. Offset returns a range that is a specified number of rows down and a specified number of columns to the left of a reference cell or range. The range that the offset function returns can be a single cell or a range of multiple adjacent cells. When returning a range, offset allows you to specify the size by inserting the number of rows and columns. The syntax is as shown. Reference is the starting point from which to count the offset rows and columns. Offset rows is the number of rows to offset by. Offset columns is the number of columns to offset by. Height is optional and indicates the height of the range to return starting at the offset target. Width is also optional and indicates the width of the range to return starting at the offset target. In our example, we return the value in the cell that is 3 rows down from cell A4. The indirect function returns a cell reference specified by a string. In other words, when you point to a cell with a cell name or range as its contents, as in this image, the indirect function does not return the content, but rather considers it as a cell reference, and so returns the content of the cell it references. In our example, this means the indirect function will not return D1, which is the value in A1, the cell the function points to, but rather considers D1 as a cell reference, and so returns 500, which is the contents of D1. The syntax is as shown. The first argument is the cell with the cell reference, written as a string. The second argument indicates if the cell reference is in A1 notation, in which case it is set to true, or R1C1 notation, in which case it is set to false. The second argument is optional. It has a default value of true. The row function returns the row number for a cell or range. The syntax is as follows. Row takes just one argument, cell reference, which can be empty, a cell reference, or a range. When no reference is provided, row returns the row number of the cell which contains the formula. In our example, row returns 3, since A3 is the third row in the spreadsheet. This function is useful for getting the row number so it can be passed into another function. The rows function returns the count of rows in a given reference as a numeric value. The syntax is as shown. The function takes one argument, that is, range. This is a reference to a range of cells or an array. In our example, we find the number of rows in the range A1 to A3 using the rows function, and this returns 3. The column function returns the column number for a cell or range. It is the column version of the row function. In our example, column returns 1, since A3 is the first column in the spreadsheet. Like rows, the columns function returns the count of columns in a given reference. In our example, columns returns 4, since the range A1 to D1 contains 4 columns.